Welcome to Dark Domain, where reality twists and darkness lurks just beneath the surface. In this place, time unravels, reflections betray, and the faintest sound can send chills down your spine. Tonight, we journey into unsettling tales where the ordinary is never quite what it seems. Brace yourself for the unknown, where every story leaves a shadow on your mind. Enter if you dare, but remember, once you step into the dark domain, there's no turning back. Before we dive into tonight's story, I have a question for you. What city do you live in, and what's the most unsettling thing about it? Share it in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications, because in Dark Domain, every city has its secrets. Faded Hours. I've always heard stories about strange inheritances, unclaimed riches, lost family fortunes, cursed objects, but I never thought I'd be part of one. My life was quiet, dull even, before I received the letter. A lawyer, some obscure firm I'd never heard of, contacted me to say I was the sole inheritor of an old house in a small town a few hours away. No explanation, no family tree, just a set of keys and an address. The house was just as unremarkable as the town. Old, a little weathered, but not falling apart. 2 stories, creaky floors, and ivy crawling up the sides like it had grown tired of holding the place together. I spent the first few days cleaning, sorting through dusty furniture and piles of forgotten things. It was odd. The house felt untouched, as if no one had lived there for years, and yet there wasn't a single cobweb or sign of decay. It wasn't eerie, not at first, just sterile. On the 4th day, I stumbled upon the room. It was strange because, according to the blueprints I found stuffed in the attic, this room shouldn't exist. I had combed through the entire house, mentally matching every room with the floor plan. But this room, tucked behind a narrow corridor in the back of the house, wasn't marked anywhere. Not on the plans, not on any documentation. Yet there it was, a hollow, windowless room, devoid of any decoration or furniture. Just 4 walls, a ceiling, and a floor, all painted in an off-putting pale gray. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the room was added later, after the original plans were drawn. Maybe it was a storage room, or a panic room of sorts. But the more I stood there, the more wrong it felt. The room was too empty, in a way I can't explain. It wasn't just physically bare. It felt like it was missing something intangible, like sound. The air inside the room was thicker, almost suffocating, but that's not what disturbed me most. It was the way time behaved in there. The first time I stepped inside, it felt like hours had passed. My phone died quickly, no signal of course, and when I finally left the room, thinking I'd been in there for half the day, I checked the clock. Only 5 minutes had gone by. I tried again, setting a timer this time. I stepped inside, closed the door, and counted. When I came out, the timer showed 1 minute had passed, but I knew deep in my bones that I had spent much longer than that inside. Curiosity got the best of me. Over the next few days, I tested the room obsessively. I brought in books, notebooks, a stopwatch, anything I could think of to try and track the distortion. No matter what I did, the result was always the same. Time outside the room moved faster. Minutes felt like days inside. At first, I thought I had stumbled upon something incredible, a way to cheat time itself. But the more I stayed in the room, the harder it became to leave. It started slowly, almost imperceptibly. I would go inside to read or write or just think, and when I left, I'd feel off, drained. The first few times, I chalked it up to exhaustion from work, from cleaning the house, from the stress of adjusting to this new, bizarre situation. But it didn't stop. Every time I left the room, it was harder to focus, harder to keep track of my thoughts. My body felt heavy, like gravity had a tighter grip on me outside the room than it did inside. One day, after what felt like only a few hours in the room, I stepped out to find that 2 full days had passed. 2 days. My phone was flooded with missed calls and messages from work. The fridge was empty because I hadn't been to the store. My reflection in the bathroom mirror startled me. My skin looked paler, thinner, as if it had lost its elasticity. My eyes were sunken, my hair thinner at the temples. I didn't understand what was happening. Was I sick? Was the room making me sick? I decided to stop using it. I shut the door, locked it even, and tried to go back to normal. But the house, hell, the world, felt wrong without it. Time outside the room dragged on, days feeling longer than the years I had spent before I moved in. I'd wake up in the middle of the night sweating, thinking about the room. I started hearing it. Not noises exactly, but a feeling, a subtle pull, like the room wanted me back inside. After 2 weeks, I gave in. It was worse this time. The room had grown, or at least it felt like it. The walls were further apart, the ceiling higher, the air thinner. I sat down in the center of the room and stayed. I didn't bring a timer. I didn't bring anything. I just sat there waiting for something, though I didn't know what. Hours, days, maybe weeks passed inside, but I didn't move. I didn't want to move. The room was consuming me, and I let it. When I finally left, the world had changed. Months had passed. Months I couldn't remember. My phone was dead. My emails filled with angry messages from people wondering where I had disappeared to. My body was frail, my muscles weak as though I hadn't used them in years. I looked at myself in the mirror again, and this time, I didn't recognize the person staring back at me. The worst part was I didn't care. The room had taken something from me, something essential. My will to live outside it. It wasn't just that time passed differently inside. The room was feeding on me. The longer I stayed in there, the more it siphoned away my sense of reality, my sense of self. I didn't want to leave anymore because the room was becoming me. Or maybe I was becoming the room. I tried to resist it once more. Just once. One last time. I locked the door, this time with heavy chains. I moved the furniture to block the entrance. But the room called to me. I could hear it whispering, not through sound, but through a sensation. My body ached without it. The world outside had become an unbearable place to exist. I've been inside for a long time now. Days, weeks, years. It doesn't matter. The room is everything. It's where I exist. And everything outside is fading away, like a distant memory. I can feel it now. The room's hunger. It feeds on me, but I can't stop. I won't stop. The room isn't just a place. It's alive. It grows stronger with every second I spend here, and soon, I think it will no longer need me. Maybe it never did. The Vanishing Reflection. I'd always been a man of routines. Every morning I'd wake up at 6, brush my teeth, and look in the mirror. It sounds mundane, but there was something calming about seeing myself each day. The familiar face, the routine grin, the same tired eyes. It made me feel anchored, like the world couldn't throw me off kilter. That all changed on the morning of January 12th, when I looked in the mirror and saw nothing. At first, I thought it was a trick of the light. Maybe the bulbs had dimmed, or the bathroom fog was playing tricks on me. I wiped the glass with my hand and squinted. Still nothing. Just an empty reflection staring back at me. I blinked, leaning in closer, my face hovering mere inches from the glass. Nothing. My reflection had vanished, leaving the room behind me perfectly visible. The towel draped over the hook, the plant in the corner, the half-used bottle of shampoo on the shelf. They were all there. But me? I was gone. I jerked away from the mirror, heart pounding in my chest. Maybe I was still dreaming? A quick pinch on my arm assured me otherwise. Fully awake, I rushed to the living room and grabbed my phone, turning on the front-facing camera. The result was the same. No reflection, just the background of my cluttered apartment. It felt as though I had evaporated from existence. I tried calling out sick from work, but the moment my boss heard my voice, he reminded me I had a client meeting. "Just show up and wing it," he said. I hung up, hands trembling. Wing it? How was I supposed to meet with clients when I couldn't even see myself in a mirror? Still, I put on a suit, though I couldn't fix my tie. There was no reflection to help me adjust it. The absurdity of it all made me laugh. A dry, bitter laugh that died as quickly as it came. On my way to work, I caught glimpses of shop windows, car mirrors, and the shiny surface of a puddle. But nothing. No sign of me anywhere. My stomach churned, a deep sense of unease growing. I wanted to tell someone, ask if they could see me. But how do you explain something so bizarre without sounding like a madman? The office felt even more surreal. Colleagues walked past, chatting, oblivious. I found myself questioning reality. Was I still here? I felt the weight of my footsteps, the coolness of the air conditioner, but it all seemed muted, distant. By noon, I couldn't take it anymore. I slipped away to the bathroom, locking the door behind me. My hands shook as I stood before the mirror. Still no reflection. I punched the wall, hoping the pain would somehow shake me back into reality. It didn't. Instead, the bathroom lights flickered, casting eerie shadows that danced across the walls. Then I saw it. Not my reflection, but a faint shape, a silhouette, shifting just beneath the surface of the mirror. It was human-like, but wrong. Its head was cocked at an unnatural angle, its limbs too long, too thin. And its eyes, dark, hollow pits that seemed to stare straight through me. I stumbled back, my heart racing. The silhouette moved closer to the glass, pressing its face against the surface as if trying to push through. My breath caught in my throat. Was it trying to replace me? I bolted out of the bathroom, hands clammy, my thoughts racing. I needed answers. Was this some sort of hallucination? A stress-induced breakdown? Or was something far more sinister at play? I went home early, hoping to escape whatever nightmare had gripped me. That night, I avoided mirrors like the plague, terrified that the figure might return. But curiosity got the better of me. Around midnight, I grabbed a hand mirror from my bedside table and held it up in the dim glow of my bedroom lamp. There it was again, the same silhouette, now clearer. Its head tilted, and for a second I swore it smiled. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I hurled the mirror across the room, the glass shattering into 1,000 tiny shards. Sleep was impossible after that. Every sound, every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind made me jump. I felt like a prisoner in my own home, trapped in a body that was somehow no longer mine. The next morning I called in sick for real. My voice was shaky, and I'm sure my boss thought I was hungover. But the truth was far worse. The figure in the mirror had become more persistent, more defined. It watched me, waiting, its presence looming like a dark cloud over everything I did. Over the next few days, I became obsessed. I covered every mirror in my apartment with cloth, avoided my reflection at all costs. But no matter what I did, I could feel it. An invisible tether pulling me towards the mirrors, daring me to look, daring me to see what waited on the other side. On the 5th day, I gave in. I uncovered the largest mirror in my bedroom and stood before it. The silhouette was waiting, grinning. It raised a hand, and I, without thinking, mirrored the motion. My hand touched the cold glass, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then I felt it. A sharp tug, like something pulling at the core of my being. I tried to pull away, but my hand was stuck. The mirror began to ripple, as if it were made of liquid. The figure on the other side pressed harder, and I felt myself being dragged forward, my reflectionless form merging with the dark silhouette. Panic surged through me, but my body wouldn't respond. The figure grinned wider, its hollow eyes gleaming with something ancient and malevolent. I felt my consciousness slip, drowning in the cold depths of the mirror. When I awoke, I was no longer in my apartment. The world around me was warped, twisted, an endless expanse of reflective surfaces, all showing the same thing. The silhouette, now perfectly still, standing in my place. I banged on the glass, screamed for help, but it was useless. The figure smiled back at me from my own world, living my life, wearing my skin. And me? I was trapped, forever behind the glass, watching from the other side. the tunnels beneath us. It wasn't uncommon to hear strange noises in the old apartment building where I lived. The walls were thin, and the pipes groaned whenever someone used water. Over time, you got used to it. The hum of the heating system, the occasional thud from the floor above, the faint creaking as the building settled into its old bones. But about a month ago, something changed. The sounds shifted. They became rhythmic. At first, it was easy to dismiss. A distant tapping, almost like a knock, every night around 2 a.m., always from beneath my floor. I assumed it was some maintenance work, though it was strange that the noise would be so regular, always at the same time, and always beneath me. Our building had no basement. I knew this for a fact because I'd explored the place when I first moved in. It was just an old 4-story structure, tucked away in a forgotten part of the city, with narrow hallways and stained carpets that had seen better days. Still, the rent was cheap, and the location was central. It was the kind of building where people didn't ask too many questions. But the noise started to get under my skin. It was a soft but deliberate tapping, like someone knocking on a wooden door over and over again. I wasn't the only one who heard it. My downstairs neighbor, Miriam, complained about it one morning. We ran into each other at the mailboxes, her eyes red with sleeplessness. "Do you hear that sound every night?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper, as if she was afraid someone would overhear. "Yeah," I nodded. "What do you think it is? Pipes?" Miriam shook her head, her fingers trembling as she fumbled with her keys. "I don't know, but it's coming from below my floor too, and we're on the ground floor. There's nothing beneath us." I froze, my stomach twisting. Miriam lived directly beneath me, and if she was hearing the same tapping, coming from below her apartment, then something wasn't right. How could there be anything beneath the ground floor? We brushed it off that day, but the idea lingered in my mind. The next night, the tapping started again at precisely 2 a.m., as it had for weeks. But this time, it was louder. I pressed my ear to the floor, my heart racing as I strained to hear. The tapping was steady, almost like Morse code, though I didn't understand the pattern. It sounded close. Curiosity gnawed at me. I couldn't sleep with the sound continuing every night, so I did something I hadn't thought to do before. I went outside. The building had a small courtyard surrounded by brick walls, and the back alley led to a rusted metal door that no one ever used. I slipped through the side exit and stood in the alley, staring at the base of the building, my breath clouding in the cold night air. I scanned the foundation, half expecting to find some logical explanation, maybe a broken vent or an old access panel, but there was nothing. Just the cold stone of the building's foundation stretching into the shadows. Except there. I almost missed it at first. Hidden behind an overgrown cluster of bushes and piles of forgotten junk was a small, rusted hatch, bolted into the ground. I crouched down, brushing away the dirt and debris. The hatch was old, the metal worn thin and covered in patches of rust. My fingers traced the outline of a circular lock that had long since been broken. Whoever had installed this hatch had abandoned it a long time ago. My mind raced. Could this be the source of the noise? But how could anyone be down there? I hesitated for a long moment, but the tapping, now louder than ever, echoed in my ears. I couldn't ignore it anymore. Slowly, I gripped the handle of the hatch and pulled. It groaned in protest, but eventually gave way with a metallic screech. Below the hatch was a dark, narrow shaft leading into the earth. A ladder, corroded with age, descended into the blackness. A foul, damp odor rose from the opening, making my stomach churn. Every instinct screamed at me to shut the hatch and forget this place existed, but I couldn't. Something was drawing me down there. I grabbed a flashlight from my apartment and returned to the alley, determined to see what was beneath. Climbing down the ladder was harder than I expected. The metal rungs felt brittle, and the darkness below seemed to swallow the light from my flashlight. The tapping grew louder as I descended, echoing up the shaft, vibrating through the walls. Finally, I reached the bottom and found myself in a narrow tunnel. The ceiling was low, and the air was thick with moisture. The walls were lined with crumbling bricks, blackened with age, and an old sewage pipe ran along one side. But it wasn't the tunnel itself that terrified me, it was the door. At the end of the tunnel, about 50 feet from where I stood, was a door. A heavy iron door with deep, unnatural grooves cut into the surface, like someone had clawed at it from the inside. The tapping was louder now, rhythmic and insistent, coming from beyond the door. I swallowed the rising panic and approached the door. My hand shook as I reached for the handle, and for a moment I hesitated. What if whatever was behind this door wasn't supposed to be found? What if it was supposed to stay locked away? But the tapping continued, and I couldn't turn back now. The door creaked as it swung open, revealing a narrow, dimly lit chamber. The walls were lined with shelves, each one filled with strange objects. Old jars, brittle books, rusted tools. At the center of the room was a large stone slab, and on it lay a figure. My heart stopped. The figure was human-shaped, but wrong. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, and its eyes were wide open, staring straight up at the ceiling, as if frozen in terror. Its mouth moved slowly, making the same rhythmic tapping sound I had heard every night. It wasn't knocking. It was its teeth, chattering in a steady, mechanical rhythm. I stumbled back, my mind reeling. The figure didn't move. It didn't acknowledge me. It just lay there, tapping, tapping, tapping. I turned to run, but as I did, I noticed something even more horrifying. Along the walls of the chamber, beneath the shelves, were more stone slabs. Dozens of them. And on each slab lay a figure, just like the one in the center of the room, all of them pale, motionless, with their teeth tapping in unison. I fled the room, slamming the door behind me. My heart pounded in my chest as I raced back down the tunnel, climbing the ladder as fast as I could. The tapping followed me, echoing up the shaft, louder and faster, as if the figures were chasing me with their rhythmic, mechanical chatter. I threw the hatch shut behind me and stumbled back into the alley, gasping for air. The tapping had stopped, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still watching me from below. The next morning, I went to tell Miriam what I'd found, but her apartment was empty. No one had seen her. Days passed, and she never returned. I called the police, but they found no sign of her. Her disappearance was just another unsolved mystery in a building full of secrets. That night, the tapping started again, louder this time, closer. I packed my things and left the apartment for good. But no matter where I go, no matter how far I run, I still hear it. The sound of teeth tapping in the silence. And I know deep down that one day they'll come for me too. You've been listening to Dark Domain, where reality unravels and fear takes shape. If tonight's story left you questioning what's real, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell so you never miss what's lurking in the shadows. Until next time, remember, the darkness is always watching.